I stood in the foyer of the $50 million Hamptons estate and watched my father pour a $400 bottle of vintage Dom Perignon into the glass of a man wearing a fake Patek Philippe. The sunlight hit the cheap cubic zirconia on the watch bezel, scattering a rainbow reflection that looked tacky against the hand-carved Italian marble floors. My father smiled at him like he was serving royalty, completely unaware that the only person in the room who could actually afford the roof over our heads was standing next to the coat rack, wearing a hoodie. My name is Elena Stone. I am 25 years old, and to the tech world, I am the lead architect and founder of Aether, a decentralized finance protocol that currently processes $4 billion in daily transaction volume. But to the people in this room, my own flesh and blood, I am just the disappointment who dropped out of college to stare at computer screens and drift through life without a real job. They see a girl in baggy cargo pants and assume I am broke. They have no idea that the plain gray hoodie I am wearing is 2-ply cashmere from Loro Piana and cost more than my mother's entire wedding dress. Tonight was the rehearsal dinner for my younger sister, Chloe. She was 23, glowing in white silk, and marrying the man my parents called the savior of the Stone legacy. To them, this wedding was the merger of two great dynasties. To me, it looked like a crime scene waiting to happen. I adjusted the noise-canceling headphones around my neck and stepped further into the room. The air smelled of expensive lilies and desperation. My mother, Nancy, spotted me immediately. Her eyes raked over my outfit with the precision of a sniper, lingering on my vintage sneakers before snapping up to my face with pure disgust. She marched over, her heels clicking aggressively on the stone floor, dragging my father, George, behind her like a piece of luggage. "Elena," she hissed, keeping her voice low so the other guests wouldn't hear. 25 years old, and you show up to your sister's engagement at a private estate looking like you just rolled out of a dumpster. Do you have no shame? George shook his head, taking a sip of the champagne he didn't pay for. "Look at your sister, Elena. Look at Chloe. She is 23 and she has already secured a future for this entire family. She found a man with ambition, a man with assets. What do you have? A laptop and a bad attitude." I looked across the room at Sebastian Blackwood, the groom. He was leaning against a pillar, laughing too loudly at his own joke while a circle of my father's friends nodded eagerly. He was 30, claimed to be a serial entrepreneur in the NFT space, and projected the kind of aggressive confidence that usually hides a hollow bank account. "I'm happy for her, Dad," I said, keeping my voice flat. "I just came to wish them well." "Well, try to do it from the corner," Nancy snapped. "We have high-profile guests here. Sebastian's business partners are flying in from Dubai. We don't need them thinking we are related to whatever this is." She gestured vaguely at my entire existence. "Be grateful we even invited you. Be grateful we are letting you stay in this mansion for the weekend. Do you know how much this rental costs? It costs more a night than you make in a year." I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing. They thought they had rented the Stone estate through an exclusive high-end agency. They thought they were paying a premium fee. They had no idea that the Stone in the estate's name wasn't a coincidence. I had bought this property 3 years ago as a tax shelter after selling my first software patent. My property manager had strict instructions to rent it to my parents for $0, disguised as a special promotional offer, just so I could see what they would do with a venue this size. And what they did was fill it with peacocks. "I'll stay out of the way," I said. "Wouldn't want to lower the property value." My parents huffed and turned back to the party, desperate to be seen near Sebastian. I walked toward the open bar, intending to grab a sparkling water and disappear, but the man of the hour intercepted me. Sebastian Blackwood slid in front of me, blocking my path. Up close, the cologne was overpowering, something musky and expensive that tried too hard. "Elena, right?"
He smirked, looking me up and down with that same condescending pity my parents used. "Chloe told me you made it. I wasn't sure you'd be able to afford the flight out here." "I managed," I said, glancing at his wrist. The Patek Philippe Nautilus looked decent from a distance, but up close, the font on the date window was slightly off-center. A super clone, probably bought in a back alley in Hong Kong for $600. "Nice watch, Sebastian." He puffed out his chest, rotating his wrist so the light caught the fake dial. "Thanks. It's a limited edition. You know how it is. Sometimes you have to treat yourself when a deal closes. But you wouldn't know much about that world, would you?" He reached out and tapped the device on my left wrist. It was a blocky, 3D printed prototype of a hardware wallet and encrypted communicator I was developing. It looked like a mess of wires and matte black plastic. "What is this?" he laughed, loud enough for the nearby bridesmaids to hear. "Some kind of calculator watch? Did you get it in a Happy Meal?" The bridesmaids giggled. Chloe, who had drifted over, covered her mouth to hide a smile. "It's a prototype," I said calmly, "for secure data transmission." Right, tech stuff, Sebastian said, waving his hand dismissively. Listen, Elena, I know things are tight for you. Chloe tells me you're still finding yourself. Once we're married, I'm going to be expanding my operations. I need someone to answer phones and handle the mail at the new office. It's minimum wage, but it's a start. I'm willing to give you a leg up, for the family's sake. Chloe beamed at him, clutching his arm. Oh, babe, that is so generous of you. Elena, say thank you. He's offering you a real job. I looked at Sebastian, then at Chloe, and finally at my parents, who were watching from a distance with approving nods. They really believed this. They believed this man was a tycoon because he posted photos of rented Lamborghinis on Instagram. They believed I was a charity case because I didn't wear logos. But the biggest joke of all wasn't the watch or the job offer. It was the money. For the last 8 years, ever since I struck gold in the early days of Bitcoin, I had been anonymously funding my parents' lifestyle. I set up a shell company, Stone Ventures LLC, to deposit $20,000 into my father's account on the first of every month. I let them believe it was a dividend from a forgotten ancestral investment my grandfather made. It was the lie that kept them off the streets, and the lie that bought the suit my father was wearing right now. I appreciate the offer, Sebastian, I said, my voice dropping an octave, becoming ice cold. But I don't think I'm qualified to handle your mail. I might accidentally open a letter from the Federal Trade Commission. Sebastian's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. His eyes narrowed. Excuse me? Just a joke, I said, letting a small, dangerous smile touch my lips. I'll let you get back to your guests. Enjoy the champagne. It's vintage 2008. I hear it has notes of hubris and ruin. I stepped around him and walked toward the terrace doors. Behind me, I heard Sebastian mutter, "What a freak," and my sister sigh, "I told you not to bother." I walked out onto the massive stone balcony overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. The wind whipped at my hoodie, but I didn't feel the cold. I pulled my phone from my cargo pocket and opened my custom admin app. The entire estate was networked. Every camera, every smart lock, every Wi-Fi node. I tapped the security tab. The feed from the foyer loaded instantly in high definition. I zoomed in on Sebastian's wrist. I took a screenshot. Then I opened a background search algorithm I had written myself. I uploaded the image of his face and the audio print of his voice from our conversation. The system began to run. It wasn't searching Google. It was searching everything. "Enjoy the party, Sebastian," I whispered to the screen, "because the rent is due." I leaned against the cold stone railing of the balcony, the bass from the DJ booth inside vibrating against the glass doors. Through the window, I watched my father holding court in the center of the room, gesturing expansively with a cigar he hadn't lit yet. He looked like the patriarch of an empire, the picture of old money and stability.
It was a performance worthy of an Oscar, especially considering the man hadn't earned a legitimate dollar in 8 years. My mind drifted back to the day I left home. I was 17, carrying a single backpack stuffed with coding manuals and a laptop that was holding on to life by a thread. My parents told me I was making a mistake, that without their guidance and the prestigious university admission they wanted to buy for me, I would end up destitute. They didn't know that 3 months prior, I had sunk every penny of my babysitting money into a new, obscure digital currency called Ethereum when it was trading for pennies. By the time I turned 18, I wasn't just solvent, I was wealthy. By 20, after launching my first proprietary trading algorithm, I was retired. But guilt is a heavy shackle. Even from a distance, I watched my parents drowning. They had leveraged themselves to the hilt, trying to maintain an image of wealth they didn't possess. The foreclosure notices were piling up. So I did the one thing I promised myself I wouldn't do. I saved them. I created Stone Ventures LLC, a faceless shell company registered in Delaware. I set up an automated transfer, $20,000 deposited into my father's checking account on the first of every month. I sent an anonymous letter on heavy watermarked stationery explaining that this was a long-lost dividend from a legacy investment made by his great-grandfather. It was a lie so flattering they swallowed it whole. They didn't question it, they didn't investigate it, they just spent it. For 8 years, I watched my hard-earned money dissolve into lease payments for Range Rovers, membership fees for country clubs they rarely visited, and designer wardrobes for Chloe. They weren't using the money to build security, they were using it as bait. They were building a stage set to trap a rich husband for my sister, terrified that if the veneer cracked, they would be exposed as the frauds they were. A notification pinged on my phone, snapping me back to the present. I looked down at the screen. The estate's smart management system, which I had coded to override any manual inputs, flagged a new expense request from the tenant. My father had just authorized an additional $50,000 for emergency floral arrangements because Sebastian thought the white roses looked too pedestrian. $50,000. That was 2 months of my anonymous subsidy, burned in seconds to impress a man who was wearing a fake watch. "You really are fearless with other people's money, aren't you, Dad?" I muttered, tapping the screen to approve the charge. I wanted the bill to be astronomical. I wanted the fall to be from the highest possible height. I swiped to the next tab. The background search algorithm I'd launched on Sebastian Blackwood had finished compiling. A red banner flashed across the top of my phone. Identity mismatch, high risk. I opened the dossier. The photo I'd taken of Sebastian in the foyer was side by side with a mugshot from the Florida Department of Corrections. Name, Kevin Roach. Alias, Sebastian Blackwood, Julian Thorne, Chase Sterling. Status, fugitive. Warrant, Interpol Red Notice 8992A. Charges, wire fraud, grand larceny, unregistered securities violations. I scrolled through the rap sheet. It was a masterpiece of modern grifting. Kevin Roach specialized in the romance rug pull. He targeted families who looked wealthy but were desperate for social climbing. He would dazzle them with rented supercars and fake portfolios, get them to invest their liquid cash into his next big venture, and then vanish into the ether, leaving them with nothing but debt and shame. He wasn't here to marry Chloe. He was here to liquidate whatever assets he thought my father had. He was a shark circling a boat that was already sinking. I needed to hear him say it. I switched apps to the estate's audio surveillance grid. I tapped the icon for the groom suite, a private parlor off the main library where Sebastian was currently taking a business call. The audio feed crackled to life in my headphones. The voice was crystal clear. "Yeah, I know, babe, it's a pain," Sebastian, no, Kevin, was saying. He wasn't talking to business partners in Dubai. He was talking to a woman. "Look, the old man is an idiot. He's eating out of my hand. I told him we need to merge our assets into a joint trust before the ceremony for tax purposes."
"He's signing the papers tomorrow morning." A pause, a cruel laugh. "The daughter, Chloe, please, she's a prop. As soon as the transfer clears, I'm ghosting. I'll be on a plane to Nonthaburi before they even cut the cake. But God, this family is cheap. You should see the flowers. I had to shame them into upgrading. They're bleeding cash just to keep up appearances. It's pathetic." My blood ran cold, then hot. He was going to drain them. He was going to take the account where I deposited the monthly allowance, and he was going to try to leverage the house, my house, if he could trick my father into signing a power of attorney. I closed the audio feed. I had everything I needed: the motive, the means, and the true identity. I could have walked in there and shouted the truth, but they wouldn't believe me. They would call me jealous. They would say I was trying to sabotage Chloe's happiness because I was a bitter, lonely failure. I needed undeniable, public, nuclear proof. My phone vibrated again. A secure text message appeared, encrypted end to end. The sender ID was just a string of random numbers, but I knew who it was. Agent Miller from the FBI Cyber Division. We had worked together last year when Aether helped track down a North Korean hacking cell. Miller: "We verified the facial rec on your guest. It's Roach. We've been chasing this guy across 3 continents. Do we have a green light to move in?" I looked through the glass doors one last time. Chloe was dancing with Kevin, her head thrown back in laughter, completely unaware that she was holding onto a ghost. My parents were clapping, their faces flushed with the intoxication of perceived victory. I typed my reply. "Elena, not yet. He's trying to get my father to sign over assets tomorrow morning. Let's catch him in the act, but be ready for the reception toast. I'm going to give you a signal." Miller: "Copy that. We are in position. Wait for the signal." I slipped the phone back into my pocket. The wind off the ocean picked up, biting through the cashmere of my hoodie, but I stood perfectly still. The evidence was locked. The trap was set. Now all I had to do was let them dig their own graves. The morning of the wedding dawned with a blinding clarity, the kind of perfect Hamptons sunlight that usually costs extra. By noon, the estate was a frenzy of activity. Caterers were setting up white tents on the lawn, florists were constructing literal walls of roses that cost more than a Honda Civic, and my parents were running around like generals in a war where the only casualty was their credit score. I stayed in the guest wing, monitoring everything through my laptop.
The estate's internal network was humming. I watched on a hidden camera feed as Kevin Roach, Sebastian, sat in the library with my father and a notary public. "It's just standard procedure, George," Kevin was saying, sliding a thick stack of documents across the mahogany desk. "Merging the family trusts shows the investors we're a united front. Once this is signed, I can move the liquidity from my Singapore accounts into your domestic holding. We're talking about an injection of 10 million, minimum." My father's hand was shaking as he reached for the pen. He was practically salivating. "Of course, Sebastian, I trust you completely. This is exactly what the Stone family needs." I zoomed in on the document. It was a durable power of attorney and a full asset transfer authorization. If my father signed that, Kevin could empty the account where I deposited the allowance within minutes. He could also try to leverage the family estate, only to discover that George Stone didn't actually own a single brick of it. I tapped a command on my keyboard. In the library, the printer suddenly whirred to life. It spat out a single page. "Error. Network connectivity lost. Verification failed." Kevin frowned. "What the hell? The notary needs the digital stamp verification." "Just a glitch," my father stammered, sweating. "The Wi-Fi here can be spotty. I'll get it fixed." I smiled. The delay bought me time until the reception. I wasn't going to let them lose the money to a con artist. I was going to let them lose it to the truth. By 6 p.m., the reception was in full swing. 300 guests filled the massive tent on the south lawn.
It was a who's who of people my parents desperately wanted to impress. Local politicians, minor celebrities, and business associates Kevin had invited, who looked suspiciously like paid actors. I walked into the tent. I had changed out of the hoodie into a simple black slip dress. Expensive, but understated. No jewelry, no makeup. I moved through the crowd like a ghost, listening to the whispers. "Can you believe the money they spent on this?" I heard George leveraged his pension. "The groom seems intense, doesn't he?" I found my spot near the tech control booth at the back of the tent. My access card, cloned from the master system, let me slip inside the draped enclosure unnoticed. The AV technician, a kid named Mike who looked bored out of his mind, jumped when I appeared. "Hey, this area is restricted," he said. "I know," I said, sliding a crisp $100 bill onto his console. "I'm the bride's sister. I just need to upload a special surprise video for the toast. It's a tribute. Can you cue this drive?" I held out a matte black USB stick. Mike looked at the money, then at the drive. "Surprise video? Sure thing. Just tell me when." "When my father raises his glass," I said. "And Mike, you might want to put on your headphones. It's going to get loud." I stepped back out into the main tent just as the music lowered. A spotlight hit the head table. My father stood up, microphone in hand, beaming. He looked at Kevin and Chloe like they were his crowning achievements. "Ladies and gentlemen," George boomed, his voice echoing over the speakers. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate this momentous union. Today we don't just join two hearts, we join two legacies." He turned to look at me, scanning the crowd until he found where I was standing in the shadows. His smile didn't waver, but his eyes turned hard. "We all know families have their challenges," he continued, a chuckle rippling through the crowd. "My eldest daughter, Elena, has always marched to the beat of a different drum, a much quieter, less successful drum. Laughter, cruel, polite laughter. But today is about success," George said, raising his voice. "It is about Chloe, the daughter who understood that duty to family comes first. And it is about Sebastian, the son I never had, a man who built his own empire from nothing, a man who reminds me of myself." Kevin stood up, waving to the crowd, flashing that fake Patek Philippe. He looked smug. He looked victorious. George raised his champagne flute. "To Sebastian and Chloe, to the future of the Stone dynasty, may it be as rich as the love in this room." "Dad," I said. I didn't shout. I didn't have to. I had tapped my smartwatch, unmuting the microphone I had patched into the estate's PA system. My voice, calm and amplified, cut through the applause like a knife. Every head turned. My father froze, glass in the air. "Elena?" he snapped, the mic picking up his irritation. "Sit down. This isn't about you." I walked out of the shadows, down the center aisle. The red light on my watch pulsed softly. "I just have one question before you drink that," I said, stopping 10 feet from the head table. "Are you sure you know who is paying for this champagne?" Chloe stood up, her face flushing red. "Elena, get out! You are ruining my wedding!" "Security!" my mother shrieked, pointing a manicured finger at me.
Get her out of here, now! Two large men in black suits started toward me from the perimeter. And are you sure, I continued, looking directly at Kevin, that you know who actually owns this house? Kevin's eyes darted to the exits. He knew. In that split second, the con artist's instinct kicked in. He smelled the smoke before the fire. Get her out, George roared, his face purple. I looked at my father. I looked at the 300 people staring at me with pity and disdain. And then I looked at the massive projection screen behind the head table. Okay, Dad, I said, have it your way. I tapped my watch. The tent lights turned a deep blood red. The music cut out instantly, replaced by a low, ominous hum. The trap was sprung. The red light bathed the tent in a chaotic crimson glow, turning the faces of the 300 guests into masks of confusion. Then the sound began. Not a voice, but a synchronized vibration. 300 smartphones buzzed simultaneously on tables, in pockets, and in clutches.
It sounded like a swarm of angry hornets taking flight. A notification appeared on every single screen, pushed through the local Wi-Fi landing page I controlled. Emergency broadcast, the truth. Behind the head table, the 40-foot projection screen that was supposed to show a montage of Chloe and Sebastian's fairy tale romance flickered. The image of the happy couple dissolved into static, replaced instantly by a split-screen display. On the left, the high-resolution photo I had taken of Sebastian in the foyer yesterday. On the right, a mugshot from the Florida Department of Corrections, looking ragged and desperate. Name, Kevin Roach. Alias, Sebastian Blackwood. Wanted, Interpol Red Notice 8992A. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the tent. Chloe spun around to look at the screen, her train tangling around her legs. What is this? Who is Kevin? It's a hack, Kevin shouted, his voice cracking. He jumped up, knocking his chair over. Don't look at it. It's a deepfake. She's hacking the system. I'm not hacking, Kevin, I said, my voice steady over the PA. I'm just screen sharing. I tapped my watch again. The mugshot minimized, replaced by a video file. It was the footage from the groom suite recorded only hours ago. Kevin's voice, amplified to concert volume, boomed through the tent. The daughter? Chloe? Please, she's a prop. As soon as the transfer clears, I'm ghosting. God, this family is cheap. They're bleeding cash just to keep up appearances. It's pathetic. Chloe went pale. She looked at the man she had just promised her life to. A prop? She whispered. You said I was your muse. Babe, listen, it's out of context. Kevin's stamina was failing, sweat beading on his forehead. Let's add some context, I said. The screen shifted again. This time it showed a timeline, a financial graph stretching back 8 years. Account, George Stone, primary checking. Source, Stone Ventures LLC. Monthly deposit, $20,000. Total transfers, $1,920,000. My father stared at the screen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Stone Ventures? That's the dividend, the legacy fund. Click the owner tab, Dad, I said. On the screen, the corporate registration for Stone Ventures LLC flipped open. Sole proprietor, Elena Stone. I didn't steal your money, I said, walking closer to the table as the guests began to murmur, then shout. I am the money. For 8 years, I have paid for your cars, your club memberships, and the very suit you are wearing to insult me. The legacy isn't grandfather. It's the daughter you called a failure because she didn't want to play trophy wife. Nancy clutched her pearls, looking from the screen to me. No, that's impossible. You wear cargo pants. You don't have a job. I don't have a job, Mother. I have a portfolio. I swiped one last time on my phone. The final document appeared. The property deed for the estate we were standing in. Property, 12 Umption Drive, East Hampton. Owner, Elena Stone. And you're not renting this house, I said. You're crashing at my place. The silence that followed was absolute. The guests were looking at my parents, not with admiration, but with the horrified realization that they were witnessing a total social autopsy. The dynasty was a lie, funded by the black sheep. Kevin Roach didn't wait for the applause. He saw the writing on the wall and the flashing lights approaching from the beach access road. He vaulted over the head table, crashing into the wedding cake. Frosting and champagne sprayed over the front row.
"Move!" he screamed, shoving a bridesmaid aside as he bolted for the exit. "Now," I said into my mic. From the sides of the tent, a dozen figures in tactical gear emerged. The letters FBI were emblazoned in yellow on their backs. Agent Miller led the charge. "Federal agents, nobody move." Kevin made it 10 yards before Miller tackled him into the sand. The fake Patek Philippe flew off his wrist and landed in the dirt. As they cuffed him, Kevin screamed profanities, blaming my father, blaming Chloe, blaming the cheap flowers. Chloe collapsed into her chair, sobbing not for the loss of her husband, but for the destruction of her image. She was already checking her phone, terrified of the live stream comments. My parents stood frozen in the wreckage of their reputation. George looked at me, his face gray.
The arrogance was gone, replaced by a terrifying hollow clarity. "Elena," he stammered, stepping over the ruined cake. "Elena, wait. You have millions? Why didn't you tell us? We're family. We could have built something together." "We?" I laughed, a harsh sound that hurt my throat. "There is no we, Dad. You made that clear when you toasted to my failure." Nancy rushed forward, trying to grab my hand, her eyes wide with a new, desperate calculation. "Sweetheart, we didn't mean it. We were just pushing you to be your best. We love you. We need to talk about this. The transfers, you can't just stop them. The mortgage is due next week." I looked at them. I saw the greed in their eyes, panic-stricken and naked. They didn't see a daughter. They saw an ATM that was about to walk away. I pulled out my phone one last time. I opened the banking app for Stone Ventures LLC. I turned to the screen so they could see it. Recurring transfer, George Stone. Status, canceled. "I've been telling you who I am for 8 years, I said, my voice cold and final. But you were too busy judging the hoodie to check the bank account. I'm 25. I have a whole life to live, and I am done funding parasites." I turned my back on them. My father shouted my name, a desperate, broken plea, but I kept walking. I walked past the shocked guests, past the FBI agents hauling Kevin Roach away, and out of the tent. A sleek, matte black Pagani Huayra pulled up to the curb, driven by my assistant. The gull-wing door hissed open. I slid into the driver's seat, tossed my phone onto the passenger side, and put my noise-canceling headphones back on. The world went silent. I gunned the engine and left the Stone family to deal with the only thing they truly owned: the silence and the debt. 3 months passed. The Hamptons disaster had long faded from the news cycle, replaced by the next scandal, but the tremors in my family were still shaking the foundations. I was sitting in a high-rise office in Tokyo, looking out at the neon skyline. My reflection in the glass showed the same girl, Hoodie, messy bun, but the eyes were lighter. The weight was gone. The fallout had been swift and brutal. Kevin Roach, or Sebastian, as my sister sometimes called him in her hysterical voicemails, never made bail. The FBI had been building a RICO case against his entire network for 2 years. My little slideshow was just the final nail. He was currently sitting in a federal holding facility in Lower Manhattan, facing 20 years for wire fraud, identity theft, and money laundering. The Patek Philippe was logged in an evidence locker as a counterfeit valued at $40. Chloe's annulment came through in record time. It turns out you can't legally marry someone using a fake identity, but the shame stuck. She had tried to pivot to a victim narrative on TikTok, crying about how she was duped by a master criminal, but the internet has a long memory. The comments were ruthless, filled with screenshots of her bragging about the empire and mocking me. She was currently working retail at a high-end boutique in Tampa, selling the kind of dresses she used to wear, trying to pay off the $60,000 in credit card debt she'd racked up planning the wedding of the century. And then there were my parents. The foreclosure on their house happened so fast it made their heads spin. Without my monthly $20,000 injection, the house of cards collapsed in weeks. The leased Range Rovers were repossessed in the driveway of their country club, a final public humiliation that made the local papers. They were evicted from the rental condo they had moved into after the wedding because they couldn't prove income. They were now living in a 1-bedroom apartment near the airport. My mother, who once wouldn't be caught dead with a blowout, was taking the bus. My father, the tycoon, was working as a greeter at a car dealership, forced to smile at people who used to envy him. My phone buzzed on the desk. It was a text from George. "Elena, please, we are desperate. The electricity is going to be cut off tomorrow. Just $5,000. We are your parents. We made you who you are." I looked at the message. He was right, in a way. They did make me who I am. They taught me that self-reliance is the only currency that doesn't devalue. They taught me that if you want to be safe, you have to build your own fortress. I didn't reply. I blocked the number, just like I had blocked the last 12.
My assistant, Kenji, walked in with a tablet. "Miss Stone, the board meeting for the new Asia-Pacific expansion starts in 5 minutes, and the architectural plans for the new headquarters in Singapore just came in." "Thank you, Kenji," I said, standing up. I pulled on my hoodie, the same gray cashmere one from the wedding. It was my armor. It was my symbol. I walked down the hall to the boardroom. 12 people in suits stood up as I entered. They didn't look at my clothes. They looked at me. They looked at the person who had built a billion-dollar protocol from a laptop in a bedroom where she wasn't wanted. I sat at the head of the table. "Let's get to work," I said. Power doesn't need to scream. It doesn't need fake watches or rented mansions or loud toasts. True power is quiet. It's the ability to walk away from the people who hurt you and never look back. It's the freedom to wear whatever you want because you're the one signing the checks. Don't judge the hoodie until you check the bank account, and never ever assume that the person staying silent in the corner isn't the one holding the keys to the castle. Because sometimes the black sheep isn't the outcast, she's the owner.